Monkey, your coat's coming off. Eva. If you check out my last video, I was showing you how to set up an incubator because I had ordered some hatching eggs. They were supposed to show up yesterday and they have not, so I'm a little bit worried. And we got this random snow flurry, which we weren't expecting, but it's not that bad. I checked the tracking and all it says is delayed. And obviously I'm not happy about that, but I want to be real with you guys, so just know that this is one of the possibilities and one of the risks that you take when you do order hatching eggs from online. If you can find them somewhere local to pick them up, that's a lot safer, but unfortunately I was not able to. The eggs are okay as long as you don't start incubating them. They can sit for an okay amount of time and survive. But with each passing day, the chances of success do slightly go down, so I'm a little worried. The chickens do not like snow. They're not happy about this. Mimosa started to come out and she saw it. Now she's trying to go right back in. So now we just wait and we hope that they finally show up. In the meantime, I have to go to work, so my mom's going to be watching and waiting for the eggs to show up today, and she'll bring them in as soon as they arrive. As long as they don't freeze, I think they should be okay. But just remember that if you get hatching eggs in the mail, plan for delays and make sure you or someone is available to wait for them in case there is a delay. If you haven't already seen my video about how to set up the incubator, go check that out. I'll link it down in the description. And now we just play the waiting game for the eggs and hope that the weather doesn't get too bad while they're riding around in the mail truck, because we're supposed to get a really bad windstorm later today. And all this weather was kind of unexpected, so that's fun. It's now the next day and the eggs still hadn't arrived the other day last time I checked in with you. I couldn't get a hold of anyone at the shipping facility, but I contacted the hatchery and they told me not to worry yet. Sometimes this happens and that there's still a pretty decent hatch rate with this, and to let them know if there was any further delays. So today, luckily, the shipping updated and it showed that it was in my town. So I called the post office and our mail truck had already left for the day. So after work, I swung by the post office and I picked up the eggs. So here they are, finally here. I'm going to take them inside now that I'm home, and I'm going to open them up and just hope that everything arrives safely. And technically, I could have waited another day and just waited for them to come to my house through the mail tomorrow. But since they had already been delayed a couple days, I didn't want to make them sit any longer than they had to. Give me a hug. So be really careful when you're unpackaging these if you get some yourself. Cackle Hatchery sent them in this piece of foam, which was really nice because it looks like it protected all the eggs really well. And it does separate down here. So we just cut the box away. And I'm going to very carefully take each one out to inspect it and just make sure that there aren't any damaged ones. Since they just went through all of the shipping and the moving and all the different fluctuating temperatures, they cannot go into the incubator right away. They're going to have to sit for at least 24 hours with the pointy end down and the round part with the air cell, like I talked about in my other video, pointing up. And we're going to let them settle. So this way the air cell, if it moved around from all the shipping, it'll go back to where it's supposed to be, and it'll let the eggs get a nice even room temperature so that they're not shocked and nothing crazy happens with them when you put them in the incubator. at how big this one is. That one has little white spots on it. Okay, I have them all in the egg carton now with the pointy end down and the blunt end up. Now this one's slightly dirty, but they always advise against washing fertile hatching eggs if they're dirty because washing them could take off some of the bloom, and the bloom is a protective layer on the eggshell that protects the embryo inside. So it's best not to wash it off. That little bit of dirt right there is not going to hurt anything. Technically, I could have just let them in here to store overnight, but since they just got here and I wanted to make sure that there weren't any broken ones or cracked ones, and I wanted to make sure that they all arrived safely, that I decided just to store them in an egg carton because this is a lot easier to get them out of than this was. So that way when the time comes tomorrow, after 24 hours, I can put them in the incubator. All I have to do is open this up and put them in. These can be stored in a nice dark room temperature overnight, let them settle, and then they can go in the incubator tomorrow. Don't put them anywhere where it's going to be bright or too hot or cold or where the temperature is going to fluctuate because that could also potentially decrease the fertility rate and the hatch rate. When the time comes to put your eggs in the incubator, make sure you document this just because life gets busy and it's best to know when to be ready for the chicks. Yes, you can do it on your phone, but I'm old-fashioned, so I like to do it in a physical planner. And in your planner or on your phone, if you prefer to do it that way, you can write down the day that you put them in the incubator, the day that they're supposed to hatch, so most of them hatch around the 21-day mark for chickens. And then you can also document in here to help yourself keep track of how many times you need to turn them, or you could set a timer on your phone to remind you if you don't have the automatic egg turner. Now all we do is let the eggs sit and we wait. And tomorrow I'll show you what to do about getting them prepped for the incubator, because there are a couple more little steps we have to do before we put them in there. It has been 24 hours now and the eggs are ready to go in the incubator. One really important step before you put them in the incubator, especially if you're not using an automatic egg turner, is to get a pencil, not a pen, and make an X on one side of the egg and a 0 or a circle, or any shape you want really on the other side of the egg. And that way it's going to help you determine which side you're flipping it on, since you have to turn the eggs periodically to make sure that the embryo doesn't stick to just one side of the shell. So we're going to do that to make sure that we're not accidentally just partially turning it or leaving it on one side for too long. And the reason why you want to use a pencil instead of a pen when you do this is because, like we mentioned earlier and in other videos, eggs are made up of tons and tons of little teeny tiny pores, and you don't want any ink or anything going into the pores and potentially hurting the embryo. Fertile eggs can go for about 7 to 10 days before they get incubated. However, the fresher the egg and the earlier you start to incubate them, the better. The reason why bird eggs in general are able to go a few days and still survive before getting any source of heat was designed because most birds will only be able to lay about 1 egg a day or every other day. And then once the hen is done laying all of her eggs for that clutch, she can go ahead and start incubating them all at the same time, so that way all the chicks hatch together around the same day. And that will greatly increase their survival rate too, since there's safety in numbers, and it would make it easier on the hen to take care of chicks that are all hatching at the same time, instead of having to go between taking care of chicks and feeding them and watching them and then going back and sitting on eggs that haven't hatched yet. So that's why eggs have evolved to be able to sit for a couple days without a heat source and then still develop an embryo once they do finally start to be incubated by either a hen or an incubator. Once you get past the 10-day mark, though, the likelihood of having a successful hatch does really start to go down. And once you do finally start to incubate them, there's no turning back. At that point, the heat is going to cause the embryo to start to form and develop, and if you take away that heat source for a prolonged period of time, the embryo will die. You can see on here that the incubator is indicating that it's ready for the eggs. It shows that little chick right there coming out of the egg, and it says temp okay, so pay attention to that. I also put additional thermometers in here just in case. I did end up moving this from the original room I had it in because it was slightly drafty in that room, and it's been doing a lot better since I moved it up here. So like I said in my part 1 video to this series, that's why it's very important to set up your incubator and test it out a few days prior to receiving your eggs. And for those of you who did not see my first video yet, make sure you go back and check that out so that this one makes more sense. And just to touch on this real quick, it's the Little Giant Still Air Incubator. So now we're going to go ahead and take this off. And obviously the temperature will drop slightly because we're going to have the lid off. But once we put the lid back on, the temperature should stabilize. But that's something just to keep an eye on at first, just to make sure there's no issues. You can never be too careful. You want to turn your eggs at least 2 to 3 times a day. So I'm going to go ahead and mark in my planner today's date that the eggs went in the incubator for day 1. And then I'm going to track on my phone and in my planner just to be extra careful of how often I turn it so that way I don't forget. It's always very good to keep a record of dates and times when you're doing something like this. The first few days, there's nothing really crazy to see. Around day 3, it is possible that you could start seeing the heartbeat and some faint signs of life in the egg if you hold a light up to it and candle it. So we're going to check back around day 3. And then anywhere between day 3 to 6, each passing day, you'll have a higher chance of starting to be able to see signs of life. So we'll definitely look at day 3, like I said, and then we'll check back around day 6 and see if anything is looking more obvious. And I'll show you guys the developing embryos. We'll probably get to see some chicks moving in there. We'll see how they grow and change with each passing day. And I'll also show you how to determine if an egg is infertile or if an egg is bad. And that's really important to know because if an egg is bad, you do not want to continue to incubate it because it has the potential to explode. And you do not want a rotten egg with a dead embryo in it exploding in your incubator because it could potentially kill and damage all the other eggs and embryos, and it would be a disgusting, filthy mess to clean up. So you should definitely always check for that. Alright, so just get the lid back on. And now we sit and we wait. You can see the temperature is reading slightly lower because I had the lid off. Obviously that's normal. And it's already starting to go back up. So I'm going to leave this for a little bit, come back up and check just to make sure that it's stabilized. This series is for hatching eggs on a budget. So even though this incubator is cheaper than a lot of other ones out there, I did do a lot of research. I read a lot of reviews first just to make sure it was one that would still be decent because obviously I don't want to take any risk when you're dealing with living creatures. So the reviews on this one were still pretty good. But if you were doing this for like a serious business or if you had some really rare, exotic, unusual breed that you were trying to hatch, I would recommend going with one a little bit more expensive and a little bit more high-end. But we'll see how this one does, and then after the 21-day period and they all hatch, I'll give you a full-on, honest review on this and one full video of my whole opinion on the thing and how to use it. But for now, I'll just continue to follow along in a several-part series with this, so make sure you check back. So around day 18, you want to increase your humidity and you can stop turning the eggs because then they're going to get into the position to hatch. So you don't want to move them around anymore or that could throw the chicks off inside of the egg and it could cause complications when they're trying to come out. So I wrote down on here, wanted to keep track of that. And then down here, I documented when they should start hatching. And I added on to here to increase the humidity on day 18 so that way they don't stick to the shell and they can hatch properly and that they don't dry out. I've heard what some people do called a dry hatch, and that's when you don't put any water in the incubator period until day 18. And a lot of people said they have really good success with that. In most cases, though, and ever since I can think of, people have always been putting water in their incubators and keeping it around 50% humidity until day 18, and there's still pretty good rates with that. But it's a very interesting concept, so I'm thinking in the future I might eventually try a dry hatch too and see how that goes compared to this one. Please go ahead and like and share this video if you would like to see me eventually do a dry hatch. Now we're going to go outside and visit with my chickens real quick. Oh, and by the way, I was on my way out the door and then I wanted to stop into the basement real quick and show you how my sprouts are doing. Because a couple videos ago I showed you guys that I was planting some seeds and here they are. They're all coming up. It's purple cauliflower, it's a couple different types of cabbage. These are getting a little bit leggy. Let me get them more under the light. I've been rotating them. The sweet onions are finally starting to come up. We got a bunch of different flowers. Look how tiny some of these are. And then the sunflower sprouts that I showed you in the chicken treat video, make sure you check that out if you haven't seen it yet. They're all sprouting now. I'm going to let them go a couple more days and get a little bit bigger before we feed it to the hens. And they're really going to love this. In case you haven't seen my other videos, I grow and sell a bunch of different kinds of food. And this spring and summer, I'll be making some videos to teach you guys how to grow food as well. So all those sprouts down there weren't only for the chickens, but don't worry, the chickens do definitely get a lot of the fresh fruits and veggies that I grow. This is my backup just in case anything goes wrong with the incubator. Honeysuckle has gone broody, which is funny because usually it's mimosa that goes broody, but this time it's honeysuckle. And if you aren't prone to having a bunch of different broody hens, it's not a bad idea to get a backup incubator just to be safe. Or a generator in case the power goes out. Make sure you subscribe and check back because on our next series for this, we're going to go ahead and show you how to candle the eggs like I talked about just a little bit ago and show you how to determine which ones are good and which ones are bad. You can tell it's been very muddy. All the snow from just a couple of days ago already melted. It's a mess out here. Are you hiding any eggs under here? I always feel bad taking it because even though there's not a rooster out here and there's no chicks or embryos in these eggs, she doesn't know that. So I always feel a little bit bad taking them from her. Ew. Sometimes that happens. You know, it's a lot of hard work for them pushing an egg out, so sometimes that happens. You could technically wash this if you wanted to, but I'm just going to go ahead and feed this back to them. I'm going to make a scrambled egg out of it. Give it to them. They'll be happy. They won't mind a little bit of yuck. And plus, the shell will be getting thrown out anyway. Or better yet, I'll put the shell in my compost pile for when I plant tomatoes later. So before we sign off, I don't want to leave you guys hanging since there's not going to be any baby chicks from the eggs that I just put in the incubator for several days now. So I'll go ahead and show you some really cute footage of some of the chicks that we got in at work today. I don't have a ton of footage because obviously since I was working, I couldn't really film the whole time, but I'll include a couple shots I got when we were getting them ready for sale and when I was advertising them for the store's Facebook page. We got in black Australorps, which is what this one is, cream leg bars, which is this one right here, and Barnevelders, which is that one. For the cream lake bars, the males are light colored like this. And then the females have these little chipmunk stripes and they're a little bit darker.
They're all standing in the